What's happening? Arnold Reasons, and I've got a real quick question for you for today. Have you stopped trusting in God and started to lean on your own understanding? Now, something that I've learned from my own personal experience is that when you're in a situation where you have no choice but to pray, when you don't have the practical resources, the qualification, the skill set, or the degree, or whatever it is, it's easier in those situations to turn to God, almost as the only and last resort. And so, practically, what that means is that when you're the underdog, when you don't have the skills and all of the abilities and this, that, and the other, we make a practice and a habit of trusting God. And as was my own experience, that can lead to you progressing, seeing God's faithfulness, seeing God put you in places that you did nothing to deserve or you didn't even have the qualifications for. But then what happens when you get to a point where you now have the skills, you now have the qualifications, you now have the experience that you once didn't have? What happens when you're in a situation where you're no longer praying for miracle money to come through the post, but your bank account is actually looking quite healthy? And you've learned to manage money in a way that doesn't put you in a situation where you're struggling financially. Something that I found in my own life is that when we get to those places, it's very easy to get so used to the rhythms and the routines and the strategies that we've learned along the way that we slowly and subtly stop trusting God, but start to lean on our systems, start to lean on our skills, start to lean on our strategies. And in those situations, prayer and inviting God in can seem more like a bit of a tick box exercise, but not something that causes us to really step out of our comfort zone anymore. When we stop trusting God and we start leaning on our own understanding, what we don't realize is that we're really boxing ourselves in. Because when we trust God, the possibilities are endless because He is an endless God. He is the most supreme and sovereign, and so He's not limited by anything at all. So it's an endless scope as to how far things can go and where we can see ourselves going and what can be accomplished. But when we lean on our own understanding, that's when we're limited to our own abilities. And so that's when we cut off the possibilities of us entering those situations and scenarios that don't make sense to the human eye and human mind based on our skills, qualifications, bank balance, or whatever it is that we've become complacent and comfortable in. And what I've seen in my own world is that that can sometimes even slow down the rate of progression of us journeying with God in our lives here on earth. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't even a video just talking about earthly success in your career, in your business, or whatever it is. Whilst it can be applied to those contexts, it can also be applied to other contexts like your spiritual growth and your spiritual development. One example is our ability to learn from the scriptures. When you're new to the Bible, everything is brand new. And so there's almost like a revelation on every single page and every single verse. But then what happens years down the line when you're more familiar with the verses and you're more familiar with the text? It's easy for our hearts to become hardened and our minds almost numb to the ability to gain new insights from God. And why? Because we've stopped trusting God to give us the insights we need from His Word, and we've started to lean on the understanding that we've gained over the years. So whatever the context is that applies to you, the question remains the same. Have you stopped trusting God and started leaning on your own understanding? Peace.